All right, good afternoon, YouTube. In today's video, we're going to go over programming. So this is going to be the first of the new programming series. So I'm going to be kind of reorganizing and redoing most of the content and trying to put them in a way that is a bit more understandable, that is a bit more structured, so that is a bit more useful to you. So there's a lot of ideas, but I want to actually put them in a way that you can implement step by step. So in today's video, we're going to start out with programming. This is going to be how you combine the size series and the strength series, because in both of them, I'm going to be giving you different topics, ideas, and methods, but it doesn't really matter if you just smash them all together, because you need to kind of understand like where you stand on things, like what is your actual goals, what are your personal preferences, what is actually best for your training, and those are things that you need to get a grasp of with programming. Just understanding how to get strong, just understanding how to get bigger is not the same as how to put it all into one program, and that's what this series is going to try to do. So let's get started. When it comes to programming, the most important thing that you need to really get a grasp of is just two things. First, consistency and effort. The reason why these are going to be the two biggest factors is because nothing you do matters if you can't do it consistently. Sporadic perfection is nowhere near as good as just mediocre consistency. Like the person who goes to the park, lifts a rock, and does as many reps as they can with it all the time they go there is going to be a lot better than someone who goes into the best possible gym in the world, lifts once a week, maybe even less than that, and tries to expect getting better results. That's just not going to be the case. The person who trains regularly, the person who does the same number of workouts per week, the person who actually applies themselves on a regular basis is going to get much better results. Even if they're doing suboptimal ways of training, but they just work hard and they're very consistent, they will outgrow you, they will get stronger than you, and they might not get the benefit of knowing more or being smarter, but just because they've mastered consistency and effort, they have made greater gains than most people can ever hope to achieve. That is why one thing I brought up in the channel a long time ago was just the idea of don't let a bodybuilder be stronger than you if you want to be a powerlifter, and don't let a powerlifter be more jacked than you if your goal is bodybuilding. This is really just to say, master effort, master working hard. That's why these are things that need to be kind of understood when it comes to training. So train regularly, be able to stick to a plan. When things get boring, when things get difficult, you stick to the plan. You still go to the gym. When things kind of get out of control, you find ways to get your ass into the gym. If, let's say, for example, you have a hour-and-a-half session, but you only have 45 minutes, cut down your workout into getting the most out of your 45 minutes, but you go. Let's say you're not really feeling it that day, but the work still needs to be done, you get it done. That is consistency. Now, the next thing, and this is why effort is super important, is because what you do consistently will eventually become limited by your level of effort. So what worked in the past will cease to work unless you continue to progress and improve. With the example I gave earlier, the person who goes to the park and just lifts the same rock for the same number of reps, the same number of sets, sure, they've made a lot more results than you, who has all the equipment in the world. But let's say he just lifts that very same rock, he doesn't level up to a bigger rock, he doesn't do more reps, he doesn't do more sets, he doesn't do more exercises with that rock. Eventually he won't be able to improve as much. That's why progressive overload is really, really important. And this is just very obvious, but it's something that I feel like needs to be said because it's something that I just see all too often in the gym. You will not improve without improvement. Like, I know that is like thanks Captain Obvious, and that's literally the next slide, but it's worth noting. Very often you can see these people in the gym who make very little changes in their physique, and maybe that's what they want. The thing is, if you are just trying to lose weight, if you just want to be active, you don't need a training program. You don't need programming, you don't need periodization, you don't need any of that. Programming and periodization are for people who are training. Training means you have a very specific goal you want to reach, but if you just want to be active, you just want to be healthy, you just need exercise. But when it comes down to actually getting something and improving yourself beyond what is just normal for like healthy living, then you need to be able to break past your limits and work hard. So like, you won't improve unless you strive for improvement. But some people, they want to improve, but they don't push themselves. They don't strive for that improvement, and they kind of wonder what happens. So you won't improve if you don't strive for improvement. So let's understand the next thing. Like I mentioned, Programming and periodization is the method of organizing effort and maximizing consistency. So with your training, you can't just push hard all the time. You're going to burn yourself out. And now suddenly, or like you're either going to burn yourself out or you're going to get injured. And now consistency is going to drop because now you have to take time off to recover. That's not good. And then let's say you are very consistent, but you aren't working like very hard, then you can't really expect to reach your goals because the effort is what's lacking. So that's why these are two things that need to go hand in hand, because consistency will be limited by your effort, and your effort does not matter if you aren't consistent with it. These things cannot be separated. These are things that you always have to take into consideration when you are going through your program. So when it comes to consistency, let's look over some questions that you should ask yourself that you need to address when you are training. These are the most common questions that you're going to ask yourself when you are trying to find a program, trying to make a program for yourself. And the first one is this: what training split should I do? How many days can you manage consistently? So let's say you think to yourself, okay, I have 4 days to train. What's the best way to going about this? Should I train all 4 days? But then you kind of look at your work schedule. These 4 days are all right next to each other. It's like, maybe that's not the best idea. Sure, you have like the rest of the week to rest, but you're not really resting because you're working. So then it's kind of like, okay, you can train 2 days in a row, take a real rest day, so that way you get to rest from the gym and from work, and then have a training day before you just go into your regular job. That is something that you need to take into consideration. What is your current life situation? And then the next thing is, what is effective for your goals? So there's a lot of different splits out there. There's a lot of different ways to organize your training, but what split allows for you consistent improvements? So let's say your main goal is strength. I do not think the push-pull leg split is very productive for strength gains. I think that there are better splits out there for the purpose of strength, but for hypertrophy, I think it's an okay split. And then let's say like the upper-lower split. This could become a difficult way to organize bodybuilding style training if you have more days available to you. If your main goal is hypertrophy, there might be better ways to kind of go about it, but it just kind of depends on the person and how they like to train. Now, obviously, I have my biases, but regardless, these are things you need to take into consideration. Next, how much volume should I do? This is really a common question, and these are all questions that can get videos of their own, and they would definitely will. But the quality of the answers you will get will come from the quality of the questions you ask yourself when making or testing your program, whether you are trying to create one for yourself or find one that's on the internet. What amount of volume can you consistently recover from? Because like I said, the thing that will stop you from making progress is getting injured, being like not being able to go to the gym. So these are things that you need to take into consideration. What amount of volume can you physically and mentally recover from? So for some people, doing 3 sets of 6 to 10 reps is much more tolerable, and you push those sets to closer to failure than, but someone else might actually prefer doing, let's say, 5 sets of 8 to 12, but they're training a bit more submaximally, training a bit further from failure, like maybe 3-4 reps away from failure, whereas the other person is training like 1 to 2 reps shy of failure. So it just kind of depends. Like, how do you prefer to train? Do you prefer getting closer to failure with your sets, or do you prefer training a little bit further from it? But these are two different situations that do factor into the training decision you should make. If you prefer training further from failure, you have to compensate for that in some way. If you train closer to failure, you can't be doing the same amount of high volume as the other person. So that's why these are things that you need to take into consideration with your programming. I think we should start a drinking game for every single time I say consideration. Maybe it's like my favorite word just because it's one of the bigger words I've said today. Anyway, next, how heavy should you train? So I kind of touched on this. Here's a couple of things. How much time do you have? Because if you have more time, you can accumulate a lot of volume with lighter loads, and you can do a lot more reps. But if you have less time, you need to be efficient, you need to be effective, you need to lift heavier. The next thing is, are you built to lift heavy? Certain movements, such as the conventional deadlift, the barbell back squat, especially the low bar squat, you might just not be built for them. And then doing them too frequently, and especially doing them too heavily, will kind of make it difficult for you to train in the long run, because you're just going to beat yourself down as a result of training those movements heavier. And then the next thing, can you lift heavier over time? If you just start your training block with 90% of your max, you are not going to be able to lift heavier over time because you're going to hit a wall very, very quickly. Whether your goal is strength or hypertrophy, you have to increase weights over time. This is very obvious for powerlifters, but bodybuilders really need to kind of understand this. The difference being, if your main goal is powerlifting, strength, you are trying to improve maximal strength. If your main goal is bodybuilding, you need to think about tonnage accumulation, more sets, more reps, more weight. Getting stronger is going to be a factor. So take that into, you know the word. Now we're going to talk about effort. So let me move myself over to the side, not that. Let me move myself over to the side. All right, so effort. This is a bit harder to kind of define because training effort is somewhat subjective, but you know, it's kind of like I forgot who said it, but there was a Supreme Court justice who said, like, I can't tell you what porn is, but I know it when you see it. Same thing happens with hard work. You know when you work hard. And maybe, and there's probably some exceptions out there who like just really don't, and that might be the case, but generally speaking, you know when you work hard. But the thing is, progressive overload is king. You have to be able to handle more weight, more sets, more reps. You have to be able to handle the amount of workouts you're doing, whether you are training more frequently or you just make the thing you are currently doing easier, because if it gets easier over time, that means you've adapted to it, and then you can now make it harder over time because you need that stress again. That's that's a very basic way of kind of brushing over progressive overload. You can kind of check the previous video. I'll put it up and put a card to link you the video I'm talking about, but it kind of tells you different ways to make progress. The next thing is you do have to push your limits. Doesn't matter your goal, you have to push your limits. So if you are a bodybuilder, you need to train close to failure at some times because this is a great way to maximize hypertrophy and it makes your training very efficient. But if you are a powerlifter, training to failure probably isn't the best idea. You want to leave some reps in the tank because you are trying to build up your abilities over time, but you do need to lift heavier over time. If you want to lift heavy things, you need to get better at lifting heavy things, and you do that by lifting heavy things. The more you train to failure, the more tired you get, the more fatigue you accumulate, and you might damage your ability to lift heavier next week because you're just burnt out. So that's why these efforts need to be organized. That's why programming and periodization have their place with training. And there's just no getting around hard efforts. Submaximal training is not the same as training easily. So with the example I gave earlier, let's say you take someone who prefers doing 3 sets of 6 to 10, pushing closer to failure, and you take someone who prefers doing 5 sets of 8 to 12, and they're training slightly further from failure. Neither of these approaches should be easy. One is hard because of volume, one is hard because of intensity or intensiveness, but they should both be hard because by that last set for that guy, he should be feeling pretty damn sore and like be feeling pretty damn hard, but like a good pump for whatever value that provides for hypertrophy. But regardless, neither of those cases should be easy. It's just the difficulty will arise and the effort will reveal itself in different ways. So how do we put this all together for your programming? So I didn't want to just kind of go over consistency and effort without giving you some actual programming advice. So when it comes to actually starting to put together your program, there's a couple steps that I'd go through with my clients, with myself, with whenever I give advice to anyone who wants to get better in the gym. And I ask them a variety of questions to essentially go down these steps. So first, you have to start where you stand. That is the whole premise of this channel, the whole premise of my message, the whole premise of what I really advocate. If you want to go from point A to point B, you actually have to start at point A. Too many times people will say to themselves, I'm trying to get from point A to point B, but they're actually in point Z somewhere off in the distance. And then you have to be able to build them up to the point where they actually start at point A. I have this with a lot of especially newer clients who tell me they want to pack on muscle, get stronger, and do all these things. But I'm just like, well, hold up, buddy. You can't do a push-up. You can't do a pull-up. You gas out after walking for 5 minutes. There's other things we need to kind of set in place so that way you can actually go from point A to point B, because right now, like I said, you're at point Z, off in the distance, super far away from your goals. Or worse than that, you don't even know where you are. You don't even know where you are, but you know where you want to end up. And then let's say you start making a plan and it only hurts you because the plan you've made might be a good plan, but it's not the plan that's right for you at this moment. So that's why you need to really take into consideration your starting point. You have to start where you stand. Now, with that, let's ask yourself a couple questions. First, what are your current dietary, training, and sleep habits? Do these three habits are actually conducive to your point B goal? So is your current diet relevant to your goal of, let's say, weight loss or getting stronger? Does it just make you fat? Does it just keep you fat? Does it just make you underfed and undernourished so now you can recover from your training? You have to answer those questions. Is your training regular? Like, let's say you're like, yeah, I've been training for the past couple years, but really it's just like 2 weeks last week, 2 days last week, 3 days the week before that. I hit 5 days of training last time. You're not really training, you're just working out very sporadically, and you need to really get down your consistency. Sleep habits. Are you sleeping enough? Sleep is the most underrated performance enhancing drug because reasons. I'll probably make another video about that. But anyway, those are things you need to consider. Next, you need to think about your history of illness or injury. Do you have limiting factors? Limitations are things that you have to work through, and you don't work through them by just avoiding them. You actually need to work through them. You need to take them into, you know the word, consideration, and then make smart training decisions. And then next, after you start where you stand, then you can finally answer yourself one question, which is, what is your goal? Like, a destination reveals a direction. So be specific. Narrow is the path to success. If you were to tell yourself, I want to lose weight, a lot of things will start to populate your mind because of the necessities that you need to implement to actually reach your goal. If you tell yourself, I want to lose weight, suddenly those donuts you eat, those breakfast cereals, those sodas, they start appearing in your mind as things you should probably avoid. But if you're just thinking to yourself, well, I just want to get in better shape, that's so broad and vague that suddenly those things like kind of have a place in there because you don't really leave room to question them. They're just there because, you know, you can see someone eating donuts, sodas, and all those other things while being in good shape. So yeah, like they have a place there, right? But then if you tell yourself, I want to lose weight, you know that those things are things you need to restrict or limit. And that's the difference. Part of the reason why people don't make goals for themselves is because a goal shows them how much hard work they need to be consistent with. And that is why when you are doing this, you need to be very honest with yourself. What is your goal? You have to be very specific with it. Next, if you have multiple goals, do they match one another? If you are saying to yourself, I want to be a power lifter and a marathon runner, probably not going to happen. I want to be a competitive eater and a physique competitor, probably not going to happen. But luckily, most those are kind of like just really weird examples. But generally speaking, if you just have the goal of strength and size where there's a shit ton of overlap, congratulations, your goals do match with one another, and they can coexist in the same program. But be honest with yourself. Some goals actually don't really vibe all that well, especially if it's more sport oriented. So basketball, football, soccer, things of that nature, a bit harder. And then the last thing, are you working hard enough? Every time you go to the gym, do you make progress? Do you push yourself? These are things you need to really ask yourself. Years of progress really boils down to one thing: one more rep, one more set, a little bit more weight. Like, let me cut down my rest time a bit. Like, let me just push through. I'm as ready as I'm ever going to be. So it doesn't matter if I do 3 minutes or 5 minutes. Like, I'm just still going to have this. I'm only going to be as recovered as I am right now. Let's go. These are things that makes progress over time. Training just organizes this. Programming, periodization, it just organizes this. That's all it does. But regardless, consistency and effort and these steps right here are things you need to contend with if you actually want to reach your goals. So that's it for this video. My name is Cross the King, StanStrength.com. I'll see you in the next video. So please like, comment, subscribe. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them in the comment section below. If not, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.